One of the most reliable fixtures in the vast majority of RPGs is the presence of different races or different classes. Now, that isn't universal entirely. So for example, if we take a game such as Witcher 3, which is a single-player action RPG, we discover that you can only play Geralt of Rivia. That said, there are a number of ways you can build your Geralt. You can focus on slower, heavy attacks, wear different types of armor, focus more on magic or alchemy. You have different options. And this is pretty much par for the course when it comes to RPGs. However, when we talk about the types of RPGs we are typically interested in, such as Baldur's Gate 3 and similar ones, there's usually more than just one choice. You have several races to choose from, and you have several classes to choose from. This was certainly the case in the original Baldur's Gate series. Baldur's Gate 2 added to this in the sense of having actual guilds and strongholds, which is to say class-related quests that you could participate in, which made you feel that the class you were playing was unique and special. And in my thoughts video on patch 8, I expressed just how impressed I was that Larian had managed to make you really feel like you were playing a bard, in terms of the instruments that you use, the abilities you have. But I didn't mention the reactivity in terms of conversations. There are a ton of dialogue options now related to being a bard throughout early access. And that's what I really want to talk about today, race and class reactivity. Because although a lot of RPGs offer you a fair bit in the way of class choice, multi-classing, as well as different race choices, they rarely, if ever, offer an intense, interactive, and above all, reactive experience based upon the class and or racial choices you've made. And in some sense, I believe that Baldur's Gate 3 will be the first RPG that really redefines the notion of reactivity with respect to class and race. And we've already seen more than hints of this in early access. For example, the fact that if you play a character that is a drow, there's a ton of reactivity when it comes to various interactions, from interacting with the first goblin you meet in the Blighted Village to a number of interactions in the Underdark for obvious reasons. And the same is true of class reactivity. I mentioned the fact that the bard has unique lines and unique interactions based upon the choices you make. And last time they introduced the barbarian, there were different choices you can make, either choice of intimidation, barbarian strength. Remember when you try to release Shadowheart from her pod on the ship, you do have that option as a barbarian to tear open the pod, your raw barbarian strength, things of that nature. And here we come to a little bit of an obstacle in our road of progress, and that is our wishes for new races and new classes to be added. I want us to all bear in mind just how much work Larian is putting into races and classes that they have already added and will be adding, which is to say, the material from the original Player's Handbook 5th edition that is guaranteed to be in the game. And let us also bear in mind the fact that it is early access, and therefore we are only seeing a tiny, tiny fraction of all the interactions we will have in the game, and many of those interactions will have that reactivity as pertains to race and class. And so, I have to be honest, as much as I would love to see the Aasimar added to the game, I have to be realistic, because you couldn't just add Aasimar to the game, given the already heavy levels of reactivity with respect to race, and think, okay, they're going to add Aasimar, but there'll be nothing notifying you that you are special or different because you are an Aasimar player character. Maybe you really want to play an Artificer, something I'll be talking about in a future video. Well, you can in theory add that class, and indeed, many modders might end up doing just that. However, that's no guarantee, if modders do it, that they'll be able to add the degree of reactivity that the other main classes have throughout the game. Again, we've only seen a smidgen of the reactivity in early access, and this type of reactivity is only going to be expanded upon with the full release of the game. So part of me thinks I might be a little bit greedy for asking for more races, more classes. More isn't always better, but I think we should all take some time to think about the fact that Larian is already doing a tremendous job when it comes to races and classes, and the fact that there's that much reactivity, already very noticeable in early access, tells us so much. And so, I'm doing my best to temper my expectations and hopes with the idea that they're already doing so much for racial and class reactivity. If they did even more, I would be overjoyed, but I wouldn't be utterly disappointed. Larian is not exactly known for DLC per se. They have added certain things over time in terms of items, but typically Larian prefers to release full games, and usually they don't add expansions or full DLC. That could change with Baldur's Gate 3, but I think it's unlikely. And of course, on a final note, we should ask the question why it's so important that we have racial and class-based reactivity. Well, that's for simple role-playing reasons, right? If you're deliberately choosing a certain class and race, even if it involves min-maxing, you're still making a deliberate choice, and you want to feel the consequences of those choices beyond mere die rolls, beyond mere numbers. You want to be acknowledged as a drow, You want to be acknowledged as a half-orc barbarian, assuming that half-orcs are introduced, which I think they will be. You want to feel the difference. On the one hand, in terms of gameplay, so imagine playing that half-orc barbarian and clobbering the enemy to death with a giant maul, versus playing a sophisticated rock gnome wizard that incinerates his enemy with a fireball. So there's the gameplay element, but also the fact that a half-orc is culturally, historically, and the context of D&D just vastly different from a rock gnome. And so these are the reasons why this reactivity adds so much to the game, and why I'm especially hyped for Baldur's Gate 3. And this is possibly one of the reasons why you're especially hyped for Baldur's Gate 3 as well. So more, of course, would be better, but even if they don't add more classes or races beyond the player's handbook, I nonetheless will be quite satisfied, because never before in the many decades of my life have I actually experienced a game that had that degree of particularity when it came to race and class to really make you feel different. As always, thank you for tuning in. Please hit the like button, comment, share, subscribe, as it really helps out the channel, and I will check you out next time. Take care.